Sooner or later, your web page is going to need to have a button. Now, a button is just a way to click on a link to go to either another website or another page on your site. And with the Gutenberg editor, we do have the buttons block. And let's just take a look at what we have here. So I have 3 different buttons, each contained within a column. A better way to look at this really is to check out the list view. And you'll see I have the columns block. Okay, it's highlighted right over there. And then, of course, I have a column and another column over here, and then finally a column down here to the right. Now, each one of these columns contains other blocks, and the one we're most interested in is the buttons block. Now, you got to be a little careful. Let's get down to here with the buttons block, because it's actually 2 blocks. One is the buttons block, which is the container which will hold at least 1 button. Okay, it could hold more. We'll see that in a little bit. But in this case, each column has a buttons block. Here's the first one. Here's the one in the center. And here's the one to the right. And within the buttons block is the actual button. I know it sounds confusing. It's a lot like the columns block that has a column in it. Well, in this case, buttons have a button in it. It's kind of confusing, and it can be a little difficult to work with because of that. So let's see exactly how you do work with the buttons block. Well, I've started this page over here, and it's got everything but the buttons, which we'll add to in a second. I thought before I did that, I would show you a little bit more about the buttons block. I think that's a pretty good idea here. So I'm just going to type in slash, and I'm going to put in buttons over here. And here is the buttons block. Okay, and it automatically gives me a button inside of that block. Let's take a look with that list view. And here it is, button, and then there's the button inside. Okay, and let's close the list view for now. And just note that when I click on this, I'm in the buttons block, and this icon over here is the containing block. In other words, we have the buttons and then we have the actual button. And it's really important to know what you're working on at all times. Again, if I click over here, if I click on the buttons block icon, well, you can see, wow, it's much bigger than if I just click on over here and I'm in the actual singular button block. If I go back to here and I want to add other buttons, all I have to do is click on the plus sign, and that's pretty handy, right? Okay, so in this case, we have 4 buttons within the buttons block. Now, how do I know? Again, I'm going to look at the list view, and you're going to see the button, and then we have the 4 buttons. Okay, let's get out of list view, and let's have a look at the buttons block itself. So this would be it right over here, the buttons block. And I can do a couple of things right off the bat. I can move it up and down like any other block. Okay, so that's what this little arrow is over here. Or I could go to full width. Okay, well, you don't really see the effect of it, but you get the idea. And I'm going to go back to wide width over here. And then over here, I have some ways to adjust these blocks. Like, for example, well, I don't think I can do that with this. Let's just try to the, yeah, it's not really working the way I thought. Ah, okay. I got that all wrong. All right, well, that's not bad. Let's just take a look at that again. So I'm going to click on here, and we can see that we are in the singular button, okay, and here's the whole buttons block right over here. All right, and I'm just going to leave it just like that. Oh, I see. So again, sometimes these are a little confusing how these work, but well, let's just see if I clicked on it. It doesn't really seem to make a difference. All right, we're just going to leave that alone. And I am also going to look at the options. So we're going to go over here to the cog, or the settings, I should say. And there aren't really a whole lot. Now, This is for the entire buttons block. All I can do, at least with this theme, is just click on vertical. Oh, all right, great. Now we're going to be able to see this. So if I go now to this will make a little more sense now because it's organized vertically. Aha, that makes much more sense. Okay, and then I'm going to just click into the actual button, and here is the button block. So before it was buttons, and now it's the button block settings, and we'll explore a little bit more of this when I actually do the buttons for the columns. But you'll see in a minute what I'm talking about. So let's just get rid of all this together. So let's select the buttons block, and we can now just go over here and we'll just remove the block. All right, great. Now I want to get my buttons in over here. So how do I do that? Well, I'm going to put my cursor at the end of the paragraph. I'm going to type in buttons, and okay, here's the buttons block, and it automatically gave me the first button. And what I'll do with that is let's look again at the settings for the actual button. So just click over there, and of course the toolbar changed. This is just the singular button toolbar over here. It's got a lot of the controls that you're probably familiar with by now. The most important one probably is right over here, the link tool. So you would type in the URL or the page, whatever you want to link to. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to type in where it says add text. I'm just going to say learn more. And I'm also, if I want bold, italic, some of these inline tools over here that change the appearance of the text and so forth, but we don't really need to play too much with that. And I'm now going to go over here to the settings for the button itself. And we saw this just a second ago. So I'm going to skip right down, I'll work my way back up to the color option. And one of the nice things about the buttons block, or in this case just the button itself, is that it's got a gradient. And I can switch to a gradient that will make it a little bit more like a button. Let's just use something a little bit different. Okay, we'll use that. Now what about the width? Let's check that out. Can we control the width? Of course, that's one thing you want to know. Well, let's see, can we make it 100%? Yeah. Now, what is it 100% of? It's 100% of the 1/3 column. Well, that sort of makes sense over there. Is there any other controls that might interest me? Yes, maybe I want to change that text color so it's a little bit more readable. That doesn't seem to be a little more readable, but yeah, that's kind of a tough thing to do. Maybe we just leave it over here like that. And I might also want to change the font size. I could do that. Now, I'm not really sure what medium is, so, well, okay, looks a little better, maybe a little easier to read. So we'll do that. And working my way back up here, I can also do an outline of the button so it looks even more like a button. And, well, I can just leave these alone. Let's just see for a second. Well, it doesn't seem to do much. These options here may vary depending on your theme. The theme I'm using is GeneratePress, a very well-known theme used by many. Now, what about the other two buttons? Should I just start all over again? Well, you could do that, but here's what you're likely to do, and let me show you a little pitfall and something that you might want to avoid. So you click on the button itself, and we're going to go over here to duplicate. Okay, so that's good. Now you're going to say, all right, let me just drag and drop it right over here, and it doesn't work. Well, the reason why it doesn't work is you need to drag the buttons block, and you're just dragging the singular button. What do I mean? List view. You can see here's the buttons block, and it's got two buttons in there. That's not going to work. Let's undo what we did. And I will save you a lot of frustration by showing you this. What you want to do is duplicate the buttons block. Aha. Go over here. Go to duplicate. And this, now you see you have a buttons and then a button. Buttons and button. And it's this block that you're going to move into place. So It can be a little tricky, but with a little bit of work, we will get there. How about that? So let me show it to you again. So this is the entire, now we see we have, right, we've got the buttons over here, and let's just duplicate the buttons block. I know, unfortunately, buttons and button, they're not the same thing, obviously. The button is contained inside the buttons block. Okay, I'm going to duplicate, and now I'm going to notice this time it's got buttons, button, and then a button inside of that. And this is what I'm going to take over here by dragging it with a little bit of patience and a little bit of luck. And there it is. So I've got a single buttons block that contains a single button in all three columns. Hopefully what I just showed you will spare you of a lot of frustration. And knowing how to use the buttons block will give you some design alternatives as you go about building your website.